war on corruption. It's David Knight.
Welcome to Real News on this October 24th, 2017. I'm David Knight. We have a big show today. We're going to be talking to a couple of individuals about the tactics of communism and about the history of communism as we approach the big day 100 years ago, October 25th, 1917. It's been about 100 years of communism. We're going to take a look at how it is affecting us today. Yes, political correctness is at the heart of the one of the key tactics of the communists to take over a country. Of course, the other part of it is to take over healthcare. Lenin talked about that in detail. So we're going to be talking to Art Thompson of the John Birch Society. We're also going to be talking to a journalist who has experienced the effects of political correctness himself as he's been banned by General Motors from reviewing their cars. You know, an automotive journalist has to have the cars supplied to them so they can review them. And that's something this guy has done, Eric Peters has done for 20 some odd years. And now because he is politically incorrect, yes, he's actually a libertarian, because he's politically incorrect, he has now been banned from reviewing their cars. So we're going to be talking to him. We're also going to take a look at Facebook's new efforts of censorship. Of course, it all began as political correctness, didn't it? That's how it always begins. Then it goes into various forms of economic censorship. And now what they're trying to do is essentially create a, I guess we could call it a face wall, a kind of Facebook firewall of news. So you're going to pay them for the news. If you don't pay them for the news, they're also going to be labeling you as fake news, and they're also going to be threatening people who share that information on the personal side. They're going to be threatening them and saying, you know, you might be liable for a lawsuit if you share information that other people have said is fake. There's also a currency war. We have so many wars, don't we? You have real wars that are going on in Syria, Yemen, other places in the Middle East. That's now spreading to Africa, into Niger, and others. And we also have the Cold War that has been revived by the Democrats with Russia. And there is a currency war, folks, joining things like the drug war as well. But there is a currency war, and this is one that is taking place on the international stage. We've had Russia triple its purchases of gold. We've had multiple reports in just the last several weeks about nations that are hostile to the United States trying to stop the petrodollar. We're going to explain the latest moves against that, as well as what's happening on the border. Meanwhile, we have GOP voters saying that they want Mitch McConnell to step down. Yes, 56% of Republicans say that Mitch McConnell should resign as majority leader. He has the worst approval rating of any politician in the survey. 16% favorable, 52% unfavorable. Bill O'Reilly, he says, is mad at God over allegations of sexual misconduct. How did he bring in Harvey Weinstein? You know, it's Meryl Streep who said, I'd like to thank God, Harvey Weinstein. I guess Harvey Weinstein is part of this. Not the real God is to blame for that. We're also going to be taking a look at Jesse Jackson. Going to have a clip for you coming up. He says that these NFL players are nothing but slaves. They've gone from picking cotton balls in the fields to picking up footballs in the fields. So they're some of the best paid slaves that we have ever seen in history. And we have some developments, of course. You've heard all the stories over the weekend that broke that President Trump is in 2 days going to finally release the CIA's files on the JFK assassination. Now, we don't know if that's going to be redacted. We don't know, because usually when they say they're going to release stuff, everybody gets excited, and then what you get is a sheet of paper with a bunch of big black bars on it. If they're not redacted, will it be anything other than the official story? We'll wait and see. It is certainly something that needs to be out there, something that we need to take a look at. But the interesting thing that is happening, and we're going to talk about this after the break, we're going to talk about developments on surveillance. What records are they keeping about us? Not just about JFK, but what records are they keeping about us? The Section 702 is coming up for reauthorization of the Patriot Act. Remember, it was Michael Hayden who bragged about the fact, I didn't need Section 702. I had orders directly from the president. Yeah, if the president does it, it's not illegal. That's what they've told us for so long, but it is. And if you do a Patriot Act, it is still unconstitutional. Stay with us. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight. Welcome to the Real News on this Tuesday, October the 24th, 2017. We have some interesting guests coming up. The topic, I guess, today as we look at this, the central part of it, as it has been for so many days, is censorship. economic censorship and warfare in the name of political correctness, as well as the efforts that Facebook is pursuing to make sure that anyone that disagrees with them is not only intimidated, not only shamed, but then also basically put off in a firewall. If you don't pay them, they're not going to promote your information, and probably they're not going to promote your information even if you try to pay them if they don't agree with you. That is the censorship that we're seeing now. And of course, the Prager Institute is now suing Google for taking down their political videos. It is a conservative libertarian group that has political videos, and they're now being censored by Google. Finally, somebody is taking them to court, and they're going to need a lot of help in that because Google has some very deep pockets. Now, as we look at the JFK files that are going to be coming out in 2 days, and as I said in the last segment, when these get released, hopefully they're going to be something other than a sheet of paper with a lot of black bars on it. But that's typically what has been the case as we get information released from government agencies. And even if it is not totally redacted, it may just be the official version. You know, when I saw this story from the Daily Mail, psychic Uri Geller claims that he was hired by the CIA to investigate JFK's assassination. This is even before the great idea that the FBI had where they would examine Stephen Paddock's brain to find out what his motives were or see if they could find some kind of a physical deformity or tumors in his brain that would give them some explanation as to why he did this. Because they don't have any motive. They don't have any motive. They don't have the ability of this guy. Everything that they find in the physical evidence contradicts their narrative. And that would be all three of the narratives so far that it contradicts. But, you know, when we look at this situation, I thought, why Uri Geller? Why would Uri Geller be hired by the CIA? You know, he's not just a psychic, but he's this guy that claimed that he could bend spoons, right, with his hands and psychic energy. So maybe they thought that Uri Geller had an explanation for the magic bullet that changed direction so many different ways, right? He's tapped into that force in the universe that can cause physical objects to reverse direction and to bend spoons and so forth. So I guess it kind of makes sense that Uri Geller would be hired by the CIA. We're going to get some crazy stuff here, folks, coming out of these files. Meanwhile, what have they not read? You know, the CIA and the NSA and all these people, they're constantly reading our stuff, aren't they? But here's something that they have not read. Trump's CIA watchdog pick never read the Senate torture report. This is the guy that President Trump has nominated to be the watchdog of the CIA. Did you know that the CIA had a watchdog? I would never have guessed that the CIA had a watchdog. I kind of thought they were let loose and off the leash. I thought that they were basically running our government as some kind of a deep state, dark force here that's behind the government. I didn't know that anybody was watching them. I didn't know they had a watchdog, but they have a person in that position who is collecting a salary and pretending to be the watchdog of the CIA. President Trump's nominee to be the CIA's watchdog told lawmakers that he never read the Senate's infamous torture report. Christopher Sharpley, who has served as the CIA's Deputy Inspector General since 2012, told the Senate Intelligence Committee that he had never read the full report detailing how the CIA treated terror suspects after 9/11. Maybe he should read the book by John Kiriakou. Maybe he should talk to John Kiriakou. No, that's right. They put him in jail, didn't they? The only information that we really have about the CIA torture program that the public has, they put that guy in jail for it. And he said, of course, he would do it again because he's that kind of guy. He ought to be the watchdog. You ought to put John Kiriakou in as the watchdog of the CIA. Then I would have some confidence that you've got a man of integrity who is actually going to do something about it instead of somebody who's been part of the cover-up for the longest period of time. And then one of the senators, Martin Heinrich, who's a Democrat from New Mexico, said, "It seems to me that it's awfully hard to learn the potential lessons of the torture report if it wasn't read." Yeah, that's right. Now, he did say that Sharpley said he had read summaries of the report. I'm sure he's very interested in making sure that the CIA doesn't do anything illegal and doesn't torture anybody. Sharpley also said that he had not destroyed the torture report as he initially thought he did. Darn it, I thought I'd destroyed that thing. You mean it's still there? We sent it to the Senate, told them that we wanted them to read it, but then when they started doing stuff with it, he started the CIA started coming after Dianne Feinstein. And even Dianne Feinstein, that old fossil who has served as a useful idiot for the surveillance state, even Dianne Feinstein was incensed. It's like, you're spying on me? You're spying on me? I mean, it's like, but I'm Dianne Feinstein. I'm part of the establishment. I'm part of the system. I'm not supposed to be spied on by the surveillance state. And as we've said from the very beginning, folks, these politicians who love the surveillance state, who love the NSA and the CIA and all the things that it gives them, they are going to be the first ones up against the wall, not from us, but from the surveillance state. We've talked about that with President Trump as well. The fact that this surveillance state is now openly opposing him, that this surveillance state has been part of this false Russiagate narrative. They were the ones who were involved with the uranium trades years ago, the FBI, the CIA, all these people. They knew about it for 15 months. And they created this situation, as we've said multiple times. And now it's interesting, even people who typically don't get into intelligence issues like Rush Limbaugh says, well, I think that they created this whole thing to cover up their crimes. You think? We've been saying that for months. I don't know why anybody would not know. You don't have to be a genius to notice that. You just have to pay a little bit of attention to understand that Hillary Clinton and the FBI, people like Comey, people like Mueller, are doing this thing. These are the people who are doing the investigation. They're the ones who actually did the collusion with the Russians. And so they created this whole situation and pushed it on to Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump is a big cheerleader for law enforcement. He's a big cheerleader for surveillance state and torture. That's one of the issues that I have with President Trump. I disagree with him strongly on those issues. I still voted for him. He's infinitely better than Hillary Clinton. I'm not going to agree with anybody on everything, and I think it's a very important issue. I'm not minimizing it. But there are also other important issues that I agree with him very strongly on. But this is one I disagree with him on. And he has to understand that he and even people like Lindsey Graham, the big cheerleader for the military-industrial complex, the big cheerleader for the surveillance state, people like Lindsey Graham, people like Dianne Feinstein, were just amazed to find out that they were being surveilled by this organization. They thought it served them. They don't understand. They serve it. And they're going to find out who the servant and who the master is if they get out of line, if they try to rein this thing in, if they try to oppose its wars that it creates. I find it interesting. President Trump is making some moves that are very important against the CIA. It was only a couple of months ago, as I tweeted out, and you can find me on Libertarian. I tweeted out over the weekend, I said, we look at this, the fact that Trump is releasing what the CIA had in its files about the JFK assassination. It's only taken a couple of months after President Trump stopped the CIA weapons shipments to the so-called moderate rebels in Syria. And we all know who they were. We all know who these people that John McCain were meeting with are. These are people who were al-Qaeda. They had multiple names. Oh, no, we're al-Nusra now. We're not al-Qaeda, we're al-Nusra. Well, eventually they came out and they admitted who they were. And so we knew all along that weapons were we had so many reports, and we talked about people seeing weapon drops, and they would run out of an area and they would abandon all of this stuff, not make any attempt to destroy it. They would just leave it for them, or they would airdrop it to them. We had people say, hey, I was a Chechen terrorist, and I was shipped in by the CIA to fight in Syria. So as soon as President Trump stopped that weapons program in Syria, ISIS started having major defeats. It didn't take very long once you stopped the CIA from arming them for these guys to start to collapse. It was the CIA that was fighting that war with ISIS. They created them, they trained them, they armed them, they gave them money. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight. Yeah, stay with us because we're going to talk about what's happening in Las Vegas. We got some updates about some things that are tangential with Vegas, as well as the surveillance state. There's a bill right now. They're calling it the Liberty Act. And you know that if it is something that's that positive, that they're going to be coming for your freedom. It was Lenin who said, yes, it is true that liberty is precious. That's why it must be rationed. And that's the attitude of our government, isn't it? Everything turns into a privilege, and they must know everything that you do. As William Binney, the former global technical head of the NSA, said he spent a career watching the Stasi in East Germany. He said, what we have here is far worse than the Stasi, far worse than any totalitarian regime that we have ever seen. The leverage that they have with the technology that they have. And now they're trying to make this Section 702, which lets them do dragnet spying, presumes to give them authority over the Fourth Amendment. It's not constitutional, but we don't have the Supreme Court justices who will actually stand with the Constitution. We have some senators now who are trying to push back against that. We have Ron Wyden, the guy who famously asked James Clapper, are you spying on the American people without a warrant? And remember, James Clapper looked down and he was rubbing his face and he couldn't look him in the eye, couldn't look us in the eye when he lied and said no. And then it was just a couple of months after that we got the Ed Snowden documents that gave us all the details, massive documents that told us the multitude of ways that our government was spying on us. He was caught bull-faced lying, but we knew he was lying. We'd had the NSA whistleblowers from 2001 on, people like Benny, people like Thomas Drake and others who had told us what was happening. But it was Ron Wyden talking to him and seeing that lie, and then 2 months later, getting the documents, the actual details, the volumes of details that we got from Ed Snowden. You know, the devil really is in the details, isn't it? And that's what we're starting to get right now about the real Russian collusion. We're starting to see those details. We knew what was happening. We knew what was happening, just like we knew what they were doing to us in 2001. We knew they were spying on us, but now we're getting the details on this as well. What will happen with this? Will we have Jeff Sessions do anything at all with it? We'll have to wait and see. Now, I'm going to get to the information about Vegas here in just 1 second. But before we do, I want to tell you about some of the sales that we have that will be ending soon. Brain Force Plus, still 50% off, the deepest discount we've ever had on Brain Force Plus. If you haven't tried it, now is a great time to try it. I guarantee you're going to like this. It'll really focus your mind. It'll really sharpen you up. It's a great supplement. If you've taken it and you like it, you can get it for 50% off and stock up right now. Also, Super Male Vitality, 30% off. Anthroplex, 50% off. Silver Bullet and Winter Sun are being heavily discounted to help you get your vitamin D and your colloidal silver daily. Pick them up now for 50% off and save big on some of our favorite products. As a matter of fact, there was just an article today about, there's on Daily Mail, and they were talking about how to tell if you have a vitamin D deficiency. Are you getting colds more frequently? This is happening because people don't get outside enough. As I was driving in, I heard a story about how Under Armour is going to stop making clothing for so many outdoor activities because nobody's buying them, because nobody's going outdoors. We're all staying inside and we're watching television, or we're playing with games or with our phones. We got a nation of couch potatoes. And if you don't get sunlight, you're going to get cold. And you're going to get colds and other things. Vitamin D will help your body to get some of the nutrients that you're missing by not getting outside, not getting in the sun. So it's important to supplement that if you are I guess we could call everybody latchkey Americans. That's basically what we've all turned into, isn't it? Also, you can get 10% off Vitamin Mineral Fusion at checkout when you enter the code VITA10. That's VITA 10. Okay, let's take a look at what's going on with surveillance. Senators are pushing a bill requiring a warrant. About that, what a novel idea. Pushing a bill that would obey the Constitution. You're supposed to have a warrant to look at this information. But of course, they come at you and they say, well, they didn't have in mind telephones when they wrote this, so we can do whatever we want. So the technology has changed, so we can do whatever we want. No, the principles remain the same. You have a right to privacy in your person. Oh, what about the TSA? Oh, well, never mind. Never mind about that person thing. And your person, your papers, and your effects. In other words, they were trying to be as inclusive as possible when they listed all that. But of course, our government doesn't care. They only make a pretense of swearing an oath to the Constitution so they can then get power and do whatever they wish. This is an effort that's being led by Democrat Ron Wyden, who was the one who grilled James Clapper, and Rand Paul. Of course, Rand Paul. Rand Paul is always there defending liberty, and not just when it comes to this. Ron Wyden has been good on this particular issue, but he doesn't defend liberty on any other issue that I know about. But Rand Paul is there on all the issues. This would require a warrant for queries of data belonging to any American collected under the program. How many times are we going to hear this? Because, you know, the information that was collected on President Trump and his campaign people. They said, well, you know, you're not supposed to be able to collect that on any Americans. That was the FISA Act that was put in back in the 1970s because we knew that the NSA and the CIA and the FBI were spying on Americans without warrants. That's why they created the FISA Act, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. Understand what the F stands for? The F is for foreign. And so you can't spy on Americans in America. You can't spy on foreigners in America without a search warrant. That's why it was foreign surveillance. But they don't care. See? Nobody cares. We got Dodson here. Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act is considered by U.S. intelligence officials to be amongst their most vital tools used to combat national and cybersecurity threats and to help protect American allies. And that's why we have things like the Las Vegas shooting, so that they can justify their existence. That's why the FBI is constantly creating events. And remember, when we had that real shooting in Garland, Texas, these two guys got out, started shooting people. They shot a security guard. He's now suing for $8 million. Why? Because the FBI was encouraging him to tear up Texas and even accompanied them to the shootout. And they have had fake events after fake events. And here they are in Las Vegas. Here's a story from the Review Journal in Las Vegas, how the FBI and the ATF are aiding the Las Vegas shooting investigation. See, they're not obstructing it, they're aiding it, according to the local paper. They say the FBI and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives are assisting local investigators to determine whether the killer acted alone. Well, that's still an open question to them. I thought they had determined that he did, or whether he was aided in the shooting that killed 58 people. See, there's so many eyewitnesses on this. They still have to talk about it being an open question, because even though they're going around and they're ignoring eyewitnesses, even though they're confiscating and destroying evidence and obstructing this investigation, they say that the local authorities are still the lead in the investigation. This is a tragedy. It is a mass shooting and not a terrorist attack. Therefore, it is being led by the local police with assistance from the FBI. You know, they come in and they say, hey, we found cameras here. Oh, well, the FBI just took them. I said at the time, you'll never see the video that was on them again. That's what they do. Stay with us. We'll be right back. All right, I was just talking about how the FBI and the ATF are just there to help the Las Vegas Police Department. As you see them at the press conferences, you see the sheriff kind of nervously glancing over at the FBI handler who is there running this incident. And I'm reminded, as we look at this, of the 4chan report that came out 3 weeks before the event, right about the same time, interestingly enough, that the CEO of MGM was selling off 90% of his stock, as I covered yesterday. 90% of his stock, when 18 out of 21 analysts rated it as a buy. In a bear market, they rated it as a buy, and he sold off 90% of his stock 3 weeks beforehand. And then, of course, we had the 4chan report saying that there were people who were working together in Vegas, casino owners who would like to see a big event against critical infrastructure so they could put in body scanners. And so then we have this report here about the underwear bomber. Remember him? The underwear bomber. I like to call him the body scanner bomber, because he was a guy that created the event for them that allowed them to bring in the body scanners. That Michael Chertoff, the guy who'd been our first head of Homeland Security, then he retired into a very lucrative retirement where they created body scanners. And then they created the perceived need for body scanners. As we had Kurt Haskell, an American lawyer out of Michigan, was on the plane, and he and his wife were sitting there waiting to board the plane, and they saw this guy come up. They said he looked like he was drunk or on drugs, looked like a bum, and there was a guy in a three-piece suit talking to the airline's person at the gate, speaking English, getting him onto the plane. And then he proceeded to be the underwear bomber, interestingly enough. Now he is doing hard time. He is suing the Department of Justice over the way they are treating him in federal prison. They've got him in hard time solitary confinement. Imagine that. Why would they put him in solitary confinement? Well, they don't want him talking to anybody, including other prisoners. And so he is suing them. He says he's being held in solitary confinement. It violates, he says, his rights as a devout Muslim. That's right. Don't put any Muslims in solitary confinement for anything. But anyway, it says it hinders him from participating in group prayer. That's how it violates his rights. And that they're forcing him to eat foods that are considered haram or religiously forbidden. But that's not the worst stuff that they're doing to him, folks. He's in a cell 23 to 24 hours a day, a cell that measures 12 feet by 7 feet, with solid walls that prevent prisoners from viewing the interiors of other cells or having any contact with other prisoners. There's a solid door with a small slot, et cetera, et cetera. You've seen the drill, right? But he has also been force-fed, which is a kind of torture. They say it made him feel like he was drowning, and it caused him to vomit. That's the force feeding that they put the people through. But just understand that when this comes through, we may mock this and we say, oh, this is a terrorist, and he's now suing people because of the way he's treated. Well, understand that this is a guy who was, I believe, a useful idiot. He may be somebody who really does truly hate the U.S. government. But as I was saying before, and as we've had, 4 or 5 years ago, we had Judge Napolitano talk about the fact that out of 21 events at that time, terrorist events, 17 of them had been created by the FBI. They had helped these people along. They had given them implements and so forth. We've now got a lawsuit about the only terrorist attack in the United States that was claimed by ISIS before this Vegas shooting. The only one. And it was the FBI-ISIS. It was the FBI-ISIS. You think the FBI-ISIS may have given this guy some stuff and nudged him along and put him on the plane? He doesn't know what he's doing. He's just an idiot patsy. He couldn't even pull that off on the plane. But that's how they get what they want. And that may be, I think that's a very strong motivation. We have seen our government stage real events. They don't care if people die or not. I mean, it could be a fake event or it could be a real event. They don't care as long as they get what they want. Now, I'm not saying that nobody was hurt. I believe people were actually, many people were hurt and killed in this event. I've said that from the very beginning. I don't think if they were going to try to do a fake event that they would do something of that magnitude and that scale. It's too easy to debunk. You would have to have too many people in on the gag to pull it off. And so I think that is absolutely for real, the event that happened there. I think that 9/11 was for real. I think people died for real in 9/11, but I don't think that the narrative that we got about it is anywhere close to being real. And that's the way I feel about Vegas as well. And as we look at the fallout from this, interestingly enough, the Democrats have given up on gun control pretty much. Chuck Schumer has said, and Chuck Schumer has been one of the biggest gun grabbers out there in the past. But he's now saying, wait a minute. It's the economy, stupid. Remember, Clinton? They got so caught up in their socialism. They got so caught up in their identity politics and their political correctness that Americans don't even know who these people are anymore. They have absolutely no contact. Even Jane Fonda was saying, we just don't know what the struggles are of the people out there. We have no contact with them. And so we have to get there and talk to them again. So they're going to try to reestablish connection with the American people. And they're going to do that through economics. It was when Bill Clinton campaigned that they kept saying, it's the economy, stupid. It's the economy, stupid. So it's going to be back to the economy. They're going to talk about pocketbook issues. They're going to try to spin socialist control, government control of medicine into a pocketbook issue. Yeah, it's a pocketbook issue. They have taken your pocketbook. And they're going to also do that with tax reform. They're going to try to tell you that it's not fair. So they're staying away from gun control. Staying away from gun control. They're going to go with economic issues. And meanwhile, we got the Republicans offering up a few gun control bills, and Paul Ryan has absolutely frozen the pro-gun bills that were working their way through Congress. Not going to move forward with that. So he's going to protect the gun control status quo. And the Democrats are not going to try to push that any farther along. And then we have Jesse Jackson. Jesse Jackson, who says that these NFL multimillionaires are actually nothing more than slaves. And let's hear that quote. You got to hear it to believe it. Here's Jesse Jackson.
All free agencies around the world owe their wages and their benefits to Kurt Flood, who paid the price of rebelling against the system of oppression. And it is oppressive. To go from picking cotton balls to picking footballs and basketballs without freedom is not very much progress. It's just a lateral move. And what's
See, did you realize that? Did you realize that these multimillionaire players in football, did you realize that they're being oppressed? They're being oppressed. They're absolutely being oppressed. And what they're doing in terms of picking up footballs and picking up basketballs, that's no different than picking up cotton. And those football fields are no different than those cotton fields back home. This is the spin, the narrative. When we come back in the next segment, we're going to cover Frederica Wilson, and we're going to take a look at what's going on with that. But again, it's that idea of privilege as they insult and call the flag and the national anthem racist, as they insult the fans who are there. And when President Trump says something about it, the NFL commissioner says, "You have the audacity to insult us." It's that sense of entitlement, that sense of privilege that comes from all this. And that is what Jesse Jackson is tapping into. Why is he doing that? Because Jesse Jackson wants to have racial conflict. That's what he thrives on. That's what fuels him, really. And it's what fuels most of what the Democrats are doing. That is why they haven't succeeded. And if Chucky Schumer and others who are a little bit more wiser understand that, then we're in trouble, because then they're going to bring in their socialist agenda by promising us free stuff like Bernie Sanders. And we've got a clip that we're going to play for you later in the broadcast about college students and their socialist mindset, how they love the Trump tax plan, as long as they think that it's Bernie Sanders. You can sell them anything if you sell it to them as Bernie Sanders. But you know what? Bernie Sanders is no different than Bernie Madoff. It's a Ponzi scheme. Socialism is a lie and a Ponzi scheme. Stay with us. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight. Cowgirl. She's a rock star now. And offers coming over the phone. That's what she's getting. She's a rock star now. Let's talk a little bit about this back and forth. And some of this is funny, but some of it isn't. I mean, at the heart of the issue is a tragedy that's been politicized. But let's talk about the back and forth. Last Friday, we had CNN come back because, she said, calling her an empty barrel, she said, that's racist. They actually did a report, said, is it really racist? That's kind of like the National Institute of Health. Earlier this year, the National Institute of Health spent $5 million to study fraternities at universities. And you know what they discovered? They actually drink more alcohol than other people do. I mean, who knew, right? Who knew? And who knew that empty barrel was not racist? It took an investigation by CNN, and actually, to their credit, they didn't try to spin it as racist. No, that was simply Frederica Wilson and the Congressional Black Congress that is still spinning it as racist. But even CNN says, no, it isn't. But they went back and they did research. They went back and they looked at Plato, for example. They said, well, we found the earliest reference to this being something from Plato. An empty vessel, he said, makes the loudest sound, so that they that have the least wit are the greatest babblers. There you go. I think it was said better by Kelly. She's an empty vessel, empty barrel, right? And then they went back, they looked at Shakespeare and others. And they did a lot of reference in here. But, the simple answer is that empty barrel simply means, it doesn't mean that it's racist. It means that she is a race-baiting, attention-seeking idiot. And that's exactly what she is. Let's play this interview where she pushed back on some of this stuff. Let's do video clip 7.
Did you hear General Kelly's remarks in the press briefing room yesterday?
I heard his remarks, and I heard him say that I bragged that I secured the money for the building of the FBI building in Miramar, and that's a lie. I feel sorry for General Kelly. He has my sympathy for the loss of his son, but he can't just go on TV and lie on me. I was not even in Congress in 2009 when the money for the building was secured. So that's a lie. How dare he? However, I named the building at the behest of Director Comey, with the help of Speaker Boehner, working across party lines. So he didn't tell the truth, and he needs to stop telling lies on me.
Well, his point was, I think, that, and though you're right, he didn't get the facts right on that, was that empty barrels make the most noise. And he was using that, he was likening that to you. Basically, that you're
I think that's a racist term.
That's racist.
I'm thinking about that when we looked it up in the dictionary, because I had never heard of an empty barrel. And I don't like to be dragged into something.
I'd like to know what dictionary she found that listed as racist. I just, CNN doesn't even agree with her on that. And you know what? She's going back and forth about the details. She said that, and this is The Hill. They say this is a Congressional Black Caucus. They're proudly standing with Congresswoman Wilson, and they demand that General Kelly apologize to her without delay and take responsibility for his reckless and false statements. And again, it's okay for them to criticize a Gold Star family, because now it's about politics, right? And so when people are talking back and forth about the widow who called Frederica Wilson and said, I'm going to get a call from President Trump. Why don't you come eavesdrop on that call and see if we can politicize this? I mean, that's what's going on. And so if you're going to politicize something, just as they come back and say to General Kelly, we can criticize you even though you're a Gold Star father because we disagree with what you had to say. You can also criticize a Gold Star widow who politicized this from the very beginning by calling her congresswoman and saying, come listen to this. We can get something that we can use against President Trump. And when they talk about this, as The Hill says, a video published Friday by the Sun Sentinel of South Florida showed the Democrat lawmaker talking about pushing through the legislation. Hold that in your mind. She said, I pushed through the legislation. And then Wilson came back, as you just heard. She said, that was funded before I got to Congress. So which is it, Frederica? Did you push it through, or did it get done before you got to Congress? Which one of those is it? And then she made this amazing statement over the weekend. She tweeted out that Niger is real Donald Trump's Benghazi. He needs to own it. And I would ask, did you or Hillary Clinton ever own Benghazi? There's absolutely no connection between these two events, other than the number of people who died. Did these soldiers call for 13 hours for help and for reinforcements to have it ignored by President Trump, by General Kelly or others? No, that didn't happen. That did happen in Benghazi. And Representative Wilson never owned that. She never owned it, and neither did Hillary Clinton. And then when she talks about him lying on her. Here's Geraldo talking about Frederica Wilson. Let's play that clip.
Listening to General Kelly, who I just met on Air Force One and I had a chat with him. He's a very serious person, very mature, very dignified. I was so humbled by his remarks, and as a war correspondent who attended many memorials in the field, in the theater, I just thought that, isn't there anything in our life now that isn't sacred, that can be above politics? How can you use this occasion to attack the president? It shows the virulence of the hatred against President Trump. But more than that, it shows a willingness to denigrate and to make base something that should be so noble and unifying. And to hear him, to hear this dad, this serious man, so obviously pained. And when he told the story of going to Arlington Cemetery, my God, Steve, I felt like crying there because he was so real, so sincere.
It's
and
very,
really,
very powerful.
His remarks, his demeanor, his message was so at odds. I tell you, I was watching, I happened to be watching, I was on the bike exercising, so I was clicking around as I customarily do, and I saw it, and I happened to watch his remarks on another network. And I was thinking of the reporters on that network. They must have felt embarrassed about the way they had politicized President Trump's call
because he answered
to that
every
widow.
question. He answered
every single question. Even, you know, I've known Donald Trump forever, so I know that he's not the best ad-libber. I know that if I tell him, if I was an aide and I said, tell him this is what he signed up for, it was a dignified thing, and President Trump would then relate it, I could see how he could maybe be clumsy in doing it. But to then politicize his syntax, or to take this noble
that's it. Politicizing his syntax. That's exactly it.
Of compassion, of inclusion, and make it more about partisan politics. I swear to God, I don't know where we go. And those reporters must have been so embarrassed.
They weren't. Did you watch the nighttime shows? Then they just started ripping Kelly, saying that he's become a Politico because he did what the president told him to do. You're going to tell me the president told him to do that? The president never told him to do that.
That was the least political speech I've heard in years from Washington. That was the most heartfelt speech.
That's right.
And
that's right.
The point he makes about 1% of the American population actually serving, and a tiny percentage of the 1% actually are in combat, risking their lives. What happened to those 4 GIs in Niger is tragic, and we have to investigate and find out exactly what the mission was, whether they were prepared, whether they were properly supported, and all the rest of it. But to take the president's condolence call to the widow and make that like everything else. It's just like everything else.
She became the number one booking at every network.
And it's so, I mean,
to intentionally politicize it and to then turn it to racism, because that's what they do with everything. And when you look at the Congressional Black Caucus, remember, these are the people, as New American reports, that sent a delegation of 7 of its members to Cuba back in 2009 to enjoy Fidel Castro's hospitality. I mean, this is the Black Lives Matter group. This is the people like Jesse Jackson who were saying that the NFL millionaires are like cotton-picking slaves. This is what they will do. They will politicize everything, and they will politicize it by turning it into race baiting. This is the record of these people. She has, as they point out, New American, they rate people on a Freedom Index score in Congress from 1 to 100. She has averaged since 2011, 21. 1 year, she got down to 11 out of 100 in terms of people who follow the Constitution. Because she's a Marxist. That's where she's coming from. Stay with us. We'll be right back.